that
Yes.
like made the decision that this individual couldn't go, and because they had done that,
Yes.
the group in place at that time then decided to take legal action against the person who had taken. Long story.
He was a deliberate disruptor, right?
Okay.
You know, don't know if he's
Yeah, it
crazy or
wasn't
if
a
he
good
was,
faith.
you know, injected into the mix, so.
I think though the important thing that I was thinking of getting at here though is while we tried to maintain and be like an accurate voice through the GA of the 99%, a lot of times individuals who attended the GA itself either didn't understand the concept or came intentionally, you know, wanting to interrupt, and they didn't occupy themselves or occupy their mind, as we put it.
Mhm.
Therefore, you know, they didn't respect the process as they should have. I think there was a lot of intentional or unintentional disrespect to the process that got things caught up, you know,
Mhm.
whereas they couldn't be passed or we wouldn't be able to talk about issues any longer because of that. So,
Can you guys speak to any specific strategies that you guys used? And that could be the fact that you were demandless and leaderless and kind of idealityless was another one. Can you just kind of talk about why you made those claims, and if and those claims were made obviously by Occupy Wall Street, and just kind of talking about if you agree with them and why you feel it was so important to be that way.
Well,
Kind of a-
when we first started, I mean, I think the part of the reason why we decided to be so broad and vague was just so that we could have a more inclusive kind of, you know, movement, so that we didn't, I mean, we felt, at least this is how I saw it, is that, you know, the bigger, wider problem was corruption in general, you know, corruption, government corruption, you know, with money in politics, and that all of the other issues would were kind of under that umbrella. That's the way that I kind of walked into it, and I think that that's why we all kind of try to maintain this sort of broader focus with the more focused, you know, issues like going to committees to work on separately and everything. The way that I always thought was more of a process, like to kind of demonstrate this democracy, like in the public square, you know, with our GAs and everything, as opposed to making policy-related demands.
Mhm.
Which, you know, isn't as effective necessarily as, I mean, it depends what your goal is. I think that there's room for both strategies. When it
Mhm.
comes down to it. Yeah, something to say about that.
the structurelessness itself, though, was intentional, I'd say, which the reasoning for that is you can have a hierarchy like in a 501c3 nonprofit where you know, have your clear board up here, and then you have its members all the way down here. The board isn't necessarily serving the members, but it's taking the members' advice. And on the other hand, Occupy was founded more on like anarchistic ideals of having no hierarchy, but having that horizontal line. And I think that it confuses a lot of people when we say we have no leaders or we're leaderless, because the intention of Occupy was to come down, occupy the space, get involved with the process, and then in itself, you know, actualize what you want to do and, you know, become the sounding board for your thoughts and then finding the people who are related to that. Demandless, we definitely were not, though.
Mhm.
We definitely had some clear demands and developed some of our own as we went on, or even if we didn't make a clear demand for something, a lot of times we would act against things that we didn't necessarily agree with without pursuing it to be an official demand.
Mhm.
But the hierarchy, we definitely wanted everybody to have that, you know, ability to voice themselves as an individual, no higher, no lower than anybody within the collective group.
And another thing too with the leaderless aspect is that, you know, we also recognize that, you know, other past movements did have a very identifiable leader, and we didn't want that. You know, I think the tactic of not having one specific leader that we all follow was not only to give everyone else a voice, but also to not give anybody a target, you know, like just to say, okay, well, if you, I mean, that's, you know, you get rid of one person, you know, you arrest them, anything like that, and then the movement falls apart. We don't want anything like that.
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of just a different strategy to make sure that we can all take the lead if need be, instead of just relying on like one individual that's known in the media or wherever.
Yeah, it's really a reclamation of the concept of democracy and a insistence on undoing hierarchical ways of thinking, the acceptance that, oh, you have money, you should be a ruler, okay. you
Yeah,
know?
yeah.
And then subverting that, which I think really caused the 1% to freak out.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and challenge them more than if it had been more of like, let's form an organization with a clear head and a clear
Yeah.
hierarchy to address this problem. You know, that it was this kind of chaotic bubbling up really freaks people out and presented more of a challenge, I think, to the dominant paradigm. And I really think that Occupy formed a paradigm shift. As many problems as we had with consensus, oh my goodness, so many more people have consensus in their pocket as something to consider doing, or not having an experience of trying it out. And even though, yeah, it's hard, yeah, all these problems happen, but now we've figured out what some of the things are that go wrong, and we'll probably do better at it the next time, right, so.
Yeah, it was really just sort of an internal revolution in a lot of ways, you know, where you realize that actually giving up your position of privilege empowered you and everyone around you to be more than they could have been otherwise. And, you know, I decided I'm white and I probably had more money than most of the other people that were involved, so I decided not to ever facilitate a GA or any kind of a meeting, and I took that stance, you know, that I could do that. And it was very hard because I was a retired college professor and I was used to leading meetings every day.
Yeah.
But it was, you know, it was just, it changes you to be part of this approach and system.
I was gonna say too, like, we incorporated, from the RNC, we incorporated St. Paul principles, which is kind of this way of looking at diversity of tactics as like a strength that we have. So we kind of reached another, you know, later on after we did so many actions, we ended up realizing that some people aren't gonna wanna do certain actions, and that's cool. And some people are gonna wanna do certain actions, and that's cool. And we learned to stop bickering about it, because that was a weakness. So once we overcame, like, oh, you guys wanna do a tent action over here, great. You guys wanna do graffiti over here, great. You guys wanna go occupy the legislative, you know, office, great. All of it is necessary. So we realized that, you know, some people are gonna shut down highways, some people are gonna blog at home, you know, but we want all of it. So we realized that we need to kind of respect each other's differences. So, and a lot of that came out of Occupy Oakland, because they were the first very, very violent, you know, political repression that they faced. And so, you know, teenagers wanted to fight back. And, you know, some of the movement said, no, you can't fight back. And some of the movement said, we have to fight back. And so there's a respect there that we have for sure. So.
Violent in terms of the oppression.
Yeah, not sorry. yeah, sorry.
In Occupy in Minnesota, we had a clear agreement to use nonviolent strategy.
Right, we did do that, yep.
Could you speak a little about why that, like what was the reason behind it? Just because, or like?
Well, originally it was for safety. If we got violent, we would have been forcibly evicted, arrested, and probably all of us trespassed from where we were at. We didn't necessarily begin with actual permits by the cities, or the county, which is whose property we were on. So essentially, we were there with the approval of Sheriff Stanek of Hennepin County, and had we done anything to cause too much alarm for him, he would have taken swift action.
Yeah.
But also, I think it's just civil disobedience, you know, violence in itself begets violence, is that the saying?
Yes.
Whereas, you know, nonviolence, we can still make a statement by achieving civil disobedience that is nonviolent. And I'd say, when it comes to nonviolent action versus violent action, some individual occupiers would agree that even destruction of property wouldn't be necessarily a violent tactic. But when it comes to people on people, it would be nonviolence. Or people against officers, the officers are the 99%. They're not up in high rises making millions of bucks. So we were out there for them, and with that understanding, we didn't necessarily want to be violent against them unless, you know, there was need for us to be protecting ourselves or defending ourselves.
Cool.
In addition to what Malia already mentioned, is that who will be the most likely to bear the brunt of repercussions?
Mhm.
Could you guys speak a little about who or what you each individually feel is the opponent of Occupy? And it's a resistance movement, and usually you resist against something. So if you could maybe speak about that.
That's pretty broad.
It's
I
pretty
have
broad.
something.
That's huge.
Yeah.
I have something. So this is Grace Lee Bogg. She's one of my sheroes. I highly recommend checking out her book, Sustainable Activism for the 21st Century. And I would like to read you a quote about, okay. So, sorry, just a second.
I'm surprised you were that prepared.
I know, no, I was reading about this earlier today. I wanted to talk about, so, oh gosh, hang on just a second. Okay, so,